The whole subject of new solutions to sustainability challenge, when we were preparing the panel, we shared our experiences, and I reflected that based on my experience in the field with smart energy decisions, a major question is around reporting and data gathering. What reporting should we be doing? What data should we be gathering? How should we be gathering it? I think at the panel this morning, the major panel this morning, there was a lot of discussion around that. Should we do carbon disclosure projects? Should we not do carbon disclosure projects? Should we work with EDF? So we're really hoping during this panel to zero in on issues related to that area. How many of you are familiar with smart energy decisions? Okay, so we're I'm glad to see we have a small but growing following. We're a online information resource for commercial and industrial companies focused entirely on energy efficiency and sourcing renewables. And I'm very, very glad to be here today. We'd like to kick off the panel really by having the panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them and their companies. David, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, John, for moderating the panel, and to UrgentNet for having us here today. So my name is David Rachelson, as you can see, the Director of Sustainability at Rubicon Global. And for those of you who don't know about Rubicon Global or what we do, we are a technology platform in the waste and recycling industry that connects a network of independent haulers with customers, and we use technology as at the core of what we do. We are able to drive cost savings, we're able to drive a more sustainable offering, and we are ultimately able to bring data and technology to an industry that traditionally has not had that.
Great.
Thank you.
My name is Graeme Dykes. I am the president of ThinkStep Americas. We are a company formed in Stuttgart, originally PE International. You may have known that from us. We formed about 25 years ago, and a lot of our brain power at that time really were the initiators of the sustainability movement in the UN, as well as through BREEAM and LEED programs. And out of that, we were focused primarily as consultants in what's called the product sustainability world, which is often a forgotten topic here, in really understanding what's in our products, understanding the life cycle analysis, understanding our supply chain, both from the product perspective and from the corporate perspective. And then out of that developed technology products, software products, and then we added the corporate sustainability, which is more the reporting end for CDP, DJSI, et cetera. And so we have three pillars, which are really the consulting strategy all the way through the implementation, the technology platform, it's about 50% of our business, and then we have the data. So we've amassed about 25 years of data. It's about 15,000 industrial processes have been mapped. We have about, I think it's about 40,000 data sets now on chemicals or products. And we have about 100,000 recommendations in our library. So our content is what we feel is a real differentiator in our world in the product side. And that is the basis. So we are a global company, 11 offices globally, and we've been serving the US market since about 2009.
Thank you. Efrain?
Efrain Quiros with UL, or Underwriters Laboratories. Really quickly, for those of you that don't know UL, we are a science company with over 100 years of experience based out of Chicago. Our business unit specifically, whereas the rest of the business unit you probably recognize as providing labels on your electronics or your batteries or making sure your hoverboards don't burn up. We focus in on environmental health, safety, and sustainability, really at the corporate or enterprise level. We provide that with the software tool. Most recently, part of the acquisition was the CR360 platform that some of you might know of, that does kind of sustainability reporting and data management and health and safety management tools. In my role, I work with our service as well as our product partnerships, including UrgentNet, which a lot of our companies or our clients kind of use the combination of the CR360 platform as well as the UrgentNet data service to really automate what they're doing for their sustainability reporting.
Excellent, thank you. So the three topics we'd like to cover during the conversation are deciding what information to report and who to report to, the challenges associated with collecting data to execute those reports, and then finally implementing the organizational change required to drive sustainability performance. So let's start with deciding what to report and who to report to. A couple of questions under this topic, and this is for each of the panelists. Maybe we'll start with Graeme on this one. Graeme, what do you see as the main issues that your clients are wrestling with around this topic of what to report and who to report to?
I think the first issue is, what do I have in my data set, and what is the quality of my data? And I think we find that much like UrgentNet, as they go to the bill payers, there are many different disparate ways of collecting data. There are different units of measure. We're typically working with multinational companies. And so a lot of people, number one, live in fear of what they can report, and so they don't report. I think if you remember, the reporting aspect is really demonstrating to the markets with the new SEC reporting, as well as with carbon disclosure, that not only do you have a program, not only are you committed to the future, but that you actually you have a certain expenditure of your percentage of your revenues going towards improving your footprint. So we typically find as just a standard that CDP is obviously, from a carbon perspective, the one that's been out there the most prevalent. And where they've moved their technology platform is really allowing on the industry benchmarking to occur. And I think that has tremendous value, and I think companies should seriously consider signing up for CDP. Many of you probably are. The other one is the DJSI, which is returning about, I think it's 3 or 4 percentage points better than the S&P in general. So that, again, are people who have a significant attachment to their brand value of what they're doing. So Owens Corning, I think, just got back on there. Very high brand value associated with DJSI. Ingersoll Rand, I think, has been on there, one of our customers, very engaged in that. And these are the people who use sustainability and environmental data for the financial benefit of their company. These are the people who understand that brand is actually a financial impact. And so we typically find if you have that as your measure, then the DJSI would be, I'll let the others go for any other topics, but those would be the
Okay.
the opening
And
comments.
DJSI is the Dow
Dow
Jones Sustainability Index, right? Okay,
Right.
great.
You have to qualify. It's a pretty rigorous process. And again, you have to understand your data, and it has to be auditable, verifiable, and most companies struggle with that. So there's an initial step, but you'll find that the rewards are pretty substantial, certainly on the stock price.
Okay. An important criteria. Efrain, thoughts on what to report and who to report to?
I think one of the main issues that people see is probably the overwhelming reporting burden. I know it's controversial, but I think it's real and it's practical. I mean, there are so many frameworks out there. I mean, I can rattle off a list of acronyms that might just frustrate everyone in the room. But how do you choose which ones are actually relevant? Can I actually chase 5, 10, 20 different frameworks and reporting standards and try to do everything and please everyone? I think that's one of the scarier things for a lot of sustainability professionals, because it's not only deciding what's material and which ones to report to, it's how do I manage all my data and information for that? Because it'd be nice if they all ask the same questions, but they don't, right? We know that they ask similar questions or want similar metrics, but with different nuanced, responses. And then you have to look at kind of what the science behind reporting, the data, the analytics, but also the art of reporting, which might have to have, GA or government affairs or legal or some other sign-off saying that really is kind of describe how you're reporting and what you're doing, because it actually can affect your brand. So I think that's probably a couple things that people are wrestling with. I mean, we tend to work on more of the science side of managing that data, but arguably I would say that how you describe it and describe what you're doing and the initiatives that you're actually running with are are arguably more important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of companies would say that if they tried to report to everything that's out there, they'd need a whole team of people just doing that. Other than CDP and Dow Jones Sustainability Index, are there any others that your clients really seem to be keen on or that you think is particularly useful?
I think the three main ones that we will see, and again, we work with all of them directly because it helps our clients automate it, but the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which is run by Rubicon, you have the GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative, as well as CDP, which was previously the Carbon Disclosure Project. I think those three are probably the main ones. You have other people looking, there's frameworks like SASB that you want to look after, as well as the Integrated Reporting Framework. Again, that's another framework that's pushing integrated thinking, but they don't go down to codifying exactly what you need to be reporting, so it's a bit amalgamous. But yeah, I think probably one other thing that I should probably mention as well is the idea of ROI and brand value. There are some significant costs that go into managing sustainability and implementing sustainability stuff. And then when you think about ROI, you try to think of the benefits you get. Unfortunately, the benefits from a brand standpoint can be intangible because it's brand, right? It's value. It's so you have very tangible costs: labor, software, capex projects. But then the brand value you get is potentially, this might sound a bit controversial. I am an advocate for sustainability, but it might be speculative. It might be more intangible. So it's kind of reconciling that kind of dissonance between those two things. Again, I wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't a proponent of sustainability, but those are probably real things that we have to consider.
Yeah, well, the whole question around ROI is really key. And SASB, once again, that's that Sustainability Accounting
Standards Board.
Standards Board, okay. David, your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, and I know you were hoping perhaps for some disagreement, but I actually completely agree with Efrain on this point, which is that there is a plethora of reporting entities out there. Moreover, taking it one step further, a lot of customers have their own internal reporting requirements and needs. And so, the challenge is how do you structure your internal systems and, from Rubicon's point of view as a supplier or a partner to other companies and making sure that we're doing the waste and recycling for them. But how do we align our reporting in a way that helps those companies with their own internal reporting needs, and whether that is for their sustainability report or so that they can then report into CDP or GRI. But again, I do think that there is a trend in that there is a proliferation of sustainability reporting, and it does definitely raise your blood pressure when you read about a new report coming out and trying to understand what impact that may have on your company and helping other companies with the same concerns and challenges.
Okay, and any concluding additional thoughts on the part of the panel for that topic about what to report and who to report to? Otherwise, we'll move on to challenge associated with gathering and collecting data to report. None? Okay. Efrain, how about if we start with you on this next piece? What do you observe in working with your clients and in the industry around key challenges associated with gathering and managing the data to report?
I suppose I'm inherently biased because we work in data management, but I think the reporting burden, not of what you need to report, but actually managing all that data. You take any room of sustainability professionals, energy professionals, EHS professionals, and you ask them to raise their hand and ask them how many went to school to be a data manager. None are going to raise their hand, right?
Right.
How many, raise your hand if you wanted to be a reporting manager. None of them are going to raise their hand, right? They wanted to drive initiatives, improve their companies, but when they get in, and depending on what level, you end up managing a lot of data. You end up having to just focus on the data and what you're going to report. And we talk about our opportunity costs. So as a professional, we would think you would want to automate as much as possible and let software, let tools, leverage technology to automate all of that data mess as much as possible, so that way you can spend 30 hours a week trying to drive change. improvements, projects, initiatives. Because if not, then you're just a data manager, and God bless them, we need lots of people like that. But most of the sustainability, energy, EHS professionals probably are not best utilized doing just that. That's my first comment on it.
Okay. Have you seen many clients successfully use automation to tackle that, or is that something that you think by and large everyone is still wrestling with?
Both, right? So there's some companies that are taking some important steps to automating, and it's not just integrations and just letting the machines talk and do it, but there's also kind of automating the processes around it. So yes, there's might be manual data entry, but maybe you don't have to do it in a series of Microsoft Office tools where I'm trying to send emails and chase everyone regularly, weekly, monthly. You know, can you have this centralized system do that for you? Aggregate that up to data that's also been brought in from the Energy Star database. That's also being brought in from the UrgentNet service. I mean, we're all sitting here today because of UrgentNet, and they have a tool that genuinely that no one else really provides, and it really does automate a lot of what would otherwise be a manual data entry component. I mean, there's companies out there that actually have rooms full of people abroad that call utilities and try to collect that data, and then they package it up as a service, where UrgentNet actually has a tool, a software that does that. So again, I'm biased because I've seen some of our clients buy the UrgentNet data service in addition to our management platform, and it works well for them because they're supplementing data, their manual data entry and all the systems integration with this data service as well.
Right.
Because ultimately what it is getting a profile of all the data in your organization, and then being able to utilize it for whatever you might need, be it strategy, operations management, reporting.
When you mentioned Energy Star, were you referring to their portfolio manager
Yes. Yeah.
platform?
Because you can pull data out of that one, you can also push data into it, so you can integrate.
Okay.
And something we do. I mean, we integrate
Right.
with, and the automation piece as well is being able to report into the Dow Jones Sustainability Index.
Okay.
Now, they have just some APIs in there, so the ability to transfer data into their tools. So our clients, you could think about the evolution or kind of where the value chain, the data starts, say, with UrgentNet, and it comes into a data management platform, it gets organized for GRI and CDP, but also gets organized for DJSI, and then it gets transferred to DJSI or GRESB or CDP. Unfortunately, CDP doesn't have a data transfer ability, but DJSI and GRESB do.
Okay.
So that's
Well,
where
I'll tell you what,
leverage
one
automation.
challenge is keeping up with all these acronyms.
Sorry, if you want me to clarify anymore, I
No,
apologize.
One thing I could say with certainty is that Gene Lupinacci from the EPA, who's here, appreciates that plug for portfolio manager. Graeme, I know based on the planning conversation that we had, I know you've got a lot of thoughts around this subject, on the challenges people face and kind of what they're doing to tackle it successfully. Why don't you take the ball next here on this topic?
Yeah, and I echo everything said so far. It's the automation is the key, right? And it's validated data. So what UrgentNet is doing is it's doing all the data validation, the quality checks on certain data that's coming in. That's beautiful, right? That's music to our ears. We don't want to be in that business. That is validated data. What often happens is you have, for us, we are collecting data from 30 different countries, but the clients don't speak English, so they want Chinese in the unit of measure, in their language, and in all the local currencies, right? So that creates a lot of issues on the data collection side. But those are pretty much been worked out by a lot of vendors, whether it's 360 or ourselves, and I'm sure you've got lots of tools in that regard as well. I see, much like what's happening in the Valley right now, though, is what's missing from the data collection is the second piece of that, which is the forgotten part, which is the data analysis. So what people are doing is they're spending all this money on the analysis, on the collection, and very little on the analysis. And so if you're in the Valley right now, if you're a coder, you probably are earning about 75% of what a data analyst is today. So these guys, this is where the money is. The money is being spent in the Valley on data analytics. And we're going to get into big data in a little bit, and how do you do the Hadoop and the machine data, and how do you translate all that from a sustainability perspective. But also to kind of flip it a little bit, where we're a little bit different is we're looking at a lot of this product data. So not only are we looking to capture actual information, maybe it's at the fence line or something inside the operations, we're looking for financial and non-financial data inside of the supply chain of the products delivered. So we're looking at non-financial data and the externalities and the cost, and how do you do that? And so that's data that doesn't exist today. So we're trying to compile industry standards and use the data we've amassed, as well as the production and operational data that exists, to try to project what the externalities would be, what are the internal costs, external costs, and try and surface those in financial terms. And that's the key difference, right? It's not just the collection of the data, it's the reflection of that and how you can improve on that for financial benefit. The forgotten part of sustainability, of course, is the profitability angle of your business. So I don't know if that answers or kind of takes out on a tangent, but it's a different angle on data collection.
Yeah. No,
but I think we all understand, why did UrgentNet start? Why did it form? Because no one's doing this.
Right.
No one's doing it well.
David, thoughts on?
Yeah, definitely. So I come at it from the waste and recycling industry, and the biggest challenge that we've seen is actually at just kind of the fundamental aspect of collecting the data. It's a very decentralized industry. A lot of, at least for us, we work with over 5,000 independent haulers with varying levels of sophistication with regard to how they collect or report information. So what we try to do in the first place is apply some standards when we partner with vendors to get them to report the weights, the material streams, the waste streams, so that then we have the ability to do the analysis, to understand how they're disposing of materials, to look for optimization opportunities in their waste streams, to translate it into greenhouse gas impact and effect using the EPA WARM model. We actually just went through an effort where we got some assistance, and we partnered with TrueCost, which is a third-party assurance firm, to help us with that process of the collection of the data, the calculation of the diversion, especially when certain haulers don't report the weights because of the way it's captured, if it's commingled in another truck, to make sure that we were properly assessing how that weight and waste was being calculated, and then taking it a step further, which we think is important, especially from a sustainability point of view, is that there is a significant greenhouse gas impact through either disposing of materials in a landfill or through diverting it. And so we wanted to help our customers and partners understand that impact, and ultimately help them have an easier way of reporting, for instance, Scope 3 and CDP and other aspects of their reporting, which previously was challenging. I always like to think, so if we were going to walk out on the street, look down Peachtree Avenue, there's probably dozens of buildings. They're all using the same energy provider, the same water provider for the most part. But they're probably using dozens of different waste haulers for whether it's municipal solid waste, mixed recycling, cardboard, plastics, compost, organics, et cetera. And so, at least from the waste and recycling area, I think, we've kind of taken care of the low-hanging fruit with regard to some of the other aspects of waste, water, energy. And now, we're really trying to put an emphasis and effort on how do we connect the impact of waste and recycling to sustainability and help companies really make another large leap in impact through their waste streams and recycling.
Interesting. Thank you for that perspective as it relates to the area of waste, which is very different and unique given the fragmented nature of that whole business. Graeme, you touched a little bit on the topic of big data and kind of what big data means to sustainability. This might be a good juncture in the conversation to discuss that for a couple of minutes. What are your thoughts on the topic?
Before I get there, I want to go back to the conversation. And pet peeve on the American market is, we're still growing up in terms of sustainability. I have the luxury of working for a European company, so they certainly are ahead in many aspects. But David Metcalf talked today about how do you cross the chasm, right? How do you go and what platform? And they're talking about energy management being basically subsumed into the work order system or work order asset management systems, right? And you've got some beautiful quantitative and qualitative data on waste, and we'll have lots of energy solutions, but energy is inside of facilities. Yours is inside of maybe facilities, probably different department.
Yeah, and to your point, it varies. Some, we've dealt with it being in sustainability, facilities, procurement, energy.
Yeah. And so right, so supply chain and all these forms you're talking about are in procurement. And then you have the financial CFO trying to understand this data. Then you've got product data and the design and the engineering. This is all sustainability related. So I think from a sustainability perspective, you can't look myopically and say, because I have an energy management system, I now have sustainability. Because I do my carbon management through my emissions systems, I have a sustainability solution. How do you look? How do you surface your risks, and how do you surface all data and look at corporate performance through the lens of sustainability? That's the nirvana, and we're trying to get there, but the idea to move this data from disparate sources, what's your asset turnover ratio? What's your trend? What's your incident tracking trend? What's your carbon intensity trends? How are you looking at that and being able to have one place to view it? It doesn't exist today, and the CSOs spend an awful lot of time managing data. It's very costly to manage that data. And so, I think the winner in this market will be someone who can really engage that. And we don't want to be the financial system, but we will assume that data. We don't want to be the waste system. We will assume your data. And the same with UrgentNet. We're going to assume this, but be the visualization to the organization. So that starts a big data discussion, right? So crazy stats. I think it's 90% of the world's data has been created and stored in the last 2 years. So you have a dizzying market that is going on right now with data security, the hacks on Target through an HVAC system, right? How do they get in? There's no security there. Machine data, there is, in certain company, there are terabytes of data being stored on a daily basis of just machine, logging in and logging off on your mobile devices on here. It's pretty robust and scary. So again, I think the big data here is as we measure a lot in the fence line right now, but now we're looking to measure in multiple tiers of the supply chain. And in most companies, they don't even know who the suppliers are and where they're going to obtain that data. And then I think one of the critical things on the analysis will be when you're missing data, what are the criteria you're using to fill the gaps of that? And then starting to move this into a data set that can be consumed by a platform. So with the Internet of Things, it's a natural direction for us to go in that. I think we're behind in that perspective. We talked about periodicity of data earlier. Do we have it on a monthly or quarterly basis? Do I need 10-second data on my energy use? No. But I do need to consume it probably on a daily basis to be able to see where I have spikes and startup and shutdown so I can look at my hotspots and actually make some meaningful decision. But that's going to just require a platform that's able to assume, hundreds of megabytes of data on a daily basis from existing systems and using some logic and analytics to do some predictive gap filling of that based on some logic you define, and then also being able to obviously interpret that data. So it's coming. It has to come. And again, the laggards will be the ones who just work within the corporation. But how do I assume UN data, EPA data? How do I get industry data? How do I look at those averages? I think that's what the CFO and CEO are looking for, because that will tell them what the return is on my sustainability dollar. And unless we have that, unless we get to that place, I think we're going to be fetching, well, let me do a lighting retrofit, which is good, but where's my hotspot analysis? We don't even really know. Most companies don't really know. They're just taking the low-hanging fruit.
It's interesting.
That's a long long-winded answer covering about 400 topics. So.
Well, I think the passion that all of you have for the topic is very much apparent. I've been given the 5-minute signal, so I thought maybe we'd swing over to Q&A at this point to see if there are any questions from the audience related to what we've discussed so far. Not all at once. None at this juncture? Okay, right here.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you talk a little bit about the different data cubes? You talked about big data. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of data cubes? Because most of the information, what you mentioned was from utility and everything, but as you can see from the conversations from throughout the morning, it turns out to be that it's beyond than that. So from your solution standpoint of view, where do you see the data cubes coming from beyond the traditional energy, water, and waste? And what are the correlations that your solutions are doing to enhance the client?
I'll start off.
Efrain, go ahead.
Trying to find a way to disagree with you just for fun, but while still agreeing with you. Without getting all the maths around kind of the exact data cubes, I think the part of the big data conversation is there's this idea or the risk that big data becomes just a catchphrase, like harmonization, like XBRL to a certain extent, where it's going to solve everything. So the paradox is that if everyone shared their data externally with everyone, it was totally transparent, we'd all be in a better place. Well, the flip side to that is there's security issues and nobody wants to give up their competitive edge, and there's a plethora of issues with that. So it's a chicken and egg situation. I think from a big data perspective, initially, you want to look at it within your fence of your business, start there and create a big data platform there. Kind of like you said, like a meta, I like to think that we're a meta platform where we can assume data from lots of different places. And in doing that, different places within the business, in doing that, you can start to try to find correlations within seemingly unrelated data. So say you take, for example, let's just take an example of EHS, environmental health, safety, and sustainability. So you start to take your stuff from your in one facility where you say, okay, my weather normalized data shows that I'm having extreme weather. I have staff who are working lots of overtime, so it's an HR piece of data. There is a history of incidents, history of corrective actions not being closed out and people being out of compliance. There is an unusually high rate of energy usage for some reason. All of this disparate information can start to give you a profile of an at-risk situation or location where you might want to put in a preventative action to try to, save someone from harm or preempt a process that might, create some sort of environmental damage. I think that's some of the interesting analytics that can be used that some of our clients are starting to work with us on and trying to identify, the correlations and the solutions from seemingly unrelated data. I don't know if I disagreed with you. I don't think I did.
So.
No, I agree with you again.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge for sustainability professionals is how to use big data to then go back and, impact the company in a tangible way. And so, with waste and recycling data, there are opportunities to look at procurement practices, to look at the way that your teams are using materials, to look for opportunities to reduce and reuse and recycle and repurpose. And so, what we really try to do is help translate the data that we collect, right? Something that, is generally an afterthought, waste and, in and of itself is something you think you don't need anymore. And then bring it back into a connection for the company to improve other operational practices and gain efficiencies.
If I could just add one more thing, we do something more the data cube side. For instance, BASF, we manage what's the product portfolio segmentation, can be done for any company. But the data cube is they look at all their portfolio of applications in its actual use phase, and they've got about 70,000 of them. And we put them into different buckets of which ones where we've invested in sustainability. And they actually have a 3% higher margin and premium on those products than anything else. So it's now a financial decision. But in that process, they're going to look at the different chemicals and chemicals of concern. So now we need a regulatory data cube, so to speak. They look at it from an environmental, a waste, and an energy perspective, both inside the fence line of their operations and through their supply chain. And it's the whole coding element of that. And at the end of the day, they score everything. So we're looking into the supply chain, we're looking in the fence line, we're looking at the regulatory components of where we're shipping and actually consuming the product. And so there are multiple different cubes of data that need to be analyzed, and then they come up with a ranking. And obviously, whichever's at the bottom, they try and do alternate assessments to get rid of those chemicals, and then lift the others through investment where it makes sense. And now they are deciding to go into China with more water-based paints, and it's opening up all sorts of new markets to them because that's an invested product in sustainability at the highest level. And again, it's a premium product for that. So the financial implications of that. Don't know if that answers your question, but you're talking about multiple different cubes to come up with where we're actually affecting market analysis now with using the data. Don't know if that helped at all. But
It's good to at least know the direction of it because sustainability is so it's not like a uniform kind of a set of a system. It's a multicultural where chemicals comes into it, regulation comes into it, data comes into it. So that's what it's trying. But I can understand that.
supplier data, product data, chemical data, waste data, end-of-life data.
And that's great to hear that the sustainable practices had a positive financial impact as well, which is great.
Yeah.
One last comment on the kind of the sustainability component, it being, is the danger in sustainability being kind of a jack of all trades but master of none, and that's something that I think we're all going through in the evolution of the sustainability profession. But you have, say, environmental compliance in the U.S., you have a very specific need for certain things. I mean, one thing for Rubicon would be interesting if they can, hazardous waste, I think, is one thing that is very non-progressive in the U.S. It's not leading edge from a technological standpoint, but companies need to track and manage all of their hazardous waste from when they create it through to where it goes, all the manifests related, and even when it sits in the disposal area, they're still responsible for it. I mean, there's some automation there that companies can really benefit from, and that's
a great point.
specifically a U.S. point.
And that's a great point, and that's obviously a challenging area, and we are, you'd mentioned the Internet of Things, trying to deploy technology, data analytics to improve the ease of use, if you will, for professionals who have to deal with this type of highly regulated material that has very specific requirements and whatnot. And so, but I also think, to your point, I mean, how many people in here associate the waste and recycling industry with big data? Raise your hand. Well, he works with us, so so does she. But generally, it's not an industry in which that's the case. And so, that's one of the things, that our company is really working to do, is to bring technology to that space.
Excellent. Well, this was good, and we've run out of time, as I thought we might. To try to recap in just a couple key points, which is tough, but there's this plethora of options that people have for reporting, monitoring, data. And I think one theme that I heard was really stay focused on ROI. What makes sense for you to do that's going to deliver some business benefit? And the ROI can either be financial or it could be around brand value. There was a lot of feedback on the sense that brand value is something compelling to think about. In getting your data organized, rely as much as you can on automation, and that's going to require that you bring in some suppliers and partners to help you do that. So when you get that automated, you can then focus your time on analyzing the data, as Graeme referenced, as opposed to gathering the data. So I think that was very thought-provoking, and please join me in thanking the panelists.